What does it mean when two countries at war agree to a temporary ceasefire for a religious holiday after months of continuous fighting? And can such a pause signal anything beyond a brief interruption? One detail stands out immediately. The proposed truce spans only from April 11th at 16 Gwar local time through Orthodox Easter Sunday, a narrow window in a conflict that has lasted for more than 2 years. This video examines what this short-term ceasefire reveals about the current state of the Russia-Ukraine war, without assuming whether it marks progress or simply a tactical pause. If this truce holds, even briefly, it introduces the possibility that limited, time-bound agreements can function as confidence-building measures in a highly volatile conflict. If it fails, it reinforces a pattern where ceasefires are used for repositioning rather than de-escalation. If it expands into something longer, it could reopen diplomatic pathways that have largely stalled. The implications extend beyond the battlefield, affecting perceptions of credibility, negotiation leverage, and the broader structure of conflict management in Europe. To understand the context, it is necessary to revisit how the war reached this stage. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the conflict has evolved into a prolonged war of attrition, particularly along the Eastern Front. Over time, both sides have adapted their strategies, with increased reliance on drones, long-range strikes, and infrastructure targeting. Civilian areas have also been affected, with repeated missile and drone attacks shaping daily life across Ukrainian cities. The positions of the two leaderships remain structurally different. Vladimir Putin has maintained that any path toward peace requires agreement on broader political and territorial conditions before a lasting ceasefire. Volodymyr Zelensky, by contrast, has consistently advocated for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire as a starting point for negotiations. This sequencing difference has been a central obstacle in previous rounds of talks. The Easter truce proposal emerges from this backdrop. Zelensky had earlier requested that the United States convey a proposal for a holiday ceasefire to Moscow, framing it as an initial step toward de-escalation. That proposal did not immediately produce a response. Days later, Putin announced a unilateral ceasefire window aligned with Orthodox Easter, beginning on April 11th and extending through the weekend. The announcement included an expectation that Ukraine would reciprocate, alongside instructions for Russian forces to remain prepared for potential violations or attacks. Ukraine's response was measured but conditional. Zelensky indicated that Ukraine was prepared to mirror any genuine pause in hostilities, emphasizing the need for civilians to experience a period without air raid sirens or immediate threats. At the same time, the response signaled caution, reflecting previous experiences where declared pauses did not fully translate into reduced fighting on the ground. Recent events illustrate why skepticism persists. Earlier in the year, Russia announced what it described as an energy truce, intended to halt strikes on Ukraine's power infrastructure during winter. That pause was short-lived, with Ukrainian authorities reporting renewed attacks soon after. In May of the previous year, a unilateral ceasefire declared by Russia to mark the anniversary of the Soviet victory in World War II was followed by reports from Ukraine of hundreds of violations within a limited time frame. These precedents shape expectations around any new truce. Conditions on the ground remain intense. Along the Eastern Front, Ukrainian forces continue to face frequent drone attacks, while Russian territory has also experienced increased Ukrainian drone strikes, particularly targeting energy-related infrastructure. Civilian impacts remain visible. In the southeastern city of Nikopol, a drone strike recently hit a bus, causing fatalities. In Zhytomyr, west of Kyiv, a missile strike near a residential area resulted in the death of a civilian. Even as the truce was announced, air raid sirens were reported in Kyiv. underscoring the difficulty of implementing a complete halt to hostilities. The involvement of external actors has also evolved. The United States has previously acted as a mediator in discussions between Russia and Ukraine, but diplomatic momentum has slowed. This shift is partly linked to changing geopolitical priorities, including increased focus on developments in the Middle East. As a result, structured negotiations have been on hold, reducing the likelihood of coordinated multilateral ceasefire frameworks. One scenario to consider is that the Easter truce holds with relatively few violations. In that case, it could serve as a limited proof of concept that localized or time-bound ceasefires are still feasible. This might encourage further attempts at similar pauses, potentially extending to humanitarian corridors or infrastructure protection agreements. However, even in this scenario, the absence of a broader political framework would limit long-term impact. A second scenario involves the truce breaking down quickly, with both sides accusing each other of violations. This outcome would reinforce existing distrust and make future ceasefire proposals more difficult to negotiate. It would also strengthen the perception that such pauses are primarily tactical, allowing forces to regroup, resupply, or reposition without fundamentally reducing the intensity of the conflict. A third possibility lies between these outcomes, where the truce is partially observed but marked by isolated incidents. This would reflect the operational complexity of enforcing a ceasefire across a long and active front line, where decentralized units, drones, and artillery systems continue to operate with limited coordination. The broader geopolitical implications are significant. The conflict in Ukraine remains a central factor in European security, influencing defense policies, energy markets, and alliance structures. Any indication that ceasefires can or cannot hold affects how external actors assess risk and plan their engagement. A credible pause could support arguments for renewed diplomacy, while repeated failures could shift emphasis further toward military solutions. At the systemic level, the situation highlights a recurring challenge in modern conflicts: the gap between declared intentions and operational realities. Announcing a ceasefire is a political act, but enforcing it requires coordination across multiple levels of command, as well as mutual trust that remains largely absent in this case. What becomes clear is that this Easter truce is less about immediate resolution and more about signaling. It reflects ongoing attempts by both sides to shape the narrative around who is open to de-escalation and under what conditions. These signals matter not only for domestic audiences, but also for international observers evaluating the trajectory of the war. In the coming days, attention will focus on measurable indicators: the number of reported violations, the scale of military activity, and whether either side extends or modifies the truce. These factors will provide a clearer picture of whether this was an isolated event or part of a broader pattern.